It's June 5th, 2023. I'm reading the suggestion of the Crazy Rich Asians from the Queen's Library. It's the local. And in here, because I don't really know um, about these things, there hasn't been much taught on this, but I'm trying to learn from the opulence of this fictional story of how some globalist theorist is writing this fanciful tale. Don't know if it's really true or not because I don't have experience with this level. However, what it is saying in this particular book is that the upper class listens to the working class in order to find out and just listens. So I find that interesting. And then I'm keeping an eye on some of the signs that or the news in this AIMLNNDI in that order of how they're portraying some kind of message, and I'm sitting trying to um, understand it. And again, I see Queen's Pride. It's like, oh my gosh, Queen's Pride. They put together something with some message, which I'm just going like again. They have in my local Bayside had a different pride yesterday, just so nobody gets confused. I was at my local event that they put on. I didn't have $35 for the ticket, but we walked up and down so I could at least observe who came out, who went to that event in supporting Bayside. So I greatly appreciate it, as opposed to again, I wasn't keeping track of who was supporting Queen's Pride, but I, again, appreciate everybody in their attempts at the moment to maintain democracy, civility for the Republic for which we stand. And knowing what the governing body looks like on the currency for this area. So that was greatly appreciated while I'm trying to traverse this tumultuous time, having like masked myself to hide my embarrassment of what's going on, not to shame myself or any family members, but knowing that some things need to be perhaps lifted up to God, in that God will see to it to find in his heart to forgive me as a daughter and to use his mighty whatever to fix these things for my betterment, and hopefully for my future. So I'm working on that as well, because one day I really hope that I can remove the hat and the sunglasses and this athletic gear and live full time as my normal, natural, beautiful self. But at the moment, um, the sunlight's a little too high, so it damages the skin. So I'm trying to keep as covered as possible to maintain the beauty of my natural skin. Um, but not really feeling comfortable in my own skin only because I don't have the correct RH. And I need to communicate with them, but also at some point I want to be able to live as my real self. So there's that. So I'm going to pause this for a minute. I'm going to pull up um, where the 12 o'clock news, um, they on Sunday they had this piece about of history reminding me that before I arrived, one of the presidents uh, put up there, under the Kennedys, put up there this affirmative action thing. And now, like, we used to be a nation of congregation looked like we could be kissing cousins between different classes of whites. And in that theoretical context or model, um, when you speak of a colored person, it's really somebody from the lower class, if the upper class was speaking, because they might have come out of a coal mine and had ash on their face, and or worked too hard out in the sun and they had a red neck or they had a sunburn or whatever. But nowadays, the story and the model's changed. It no longer is a Scandinavian tale. It's very really somebody else's children, and there's some more dangerous things they've made habit of and credit gathering of in the local areas, which now are playing out insidiously before my eyes, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not laughing. I'm also not joking about my part. So there's that. And so that came on with this affirmative action thing with the president known as Kennedy. But I don't know if he was paid for and hired by some United Nations agenda prior to my arrival. I don't know when taking of foreign money inside of a US system became whatever. Um, like, I don't really have the history on any of that. I've found nobody who will confirm it. So I'm just looking at this, and now I'm seeing just how much non-Scandinavian foot soldiers are entering New York. They're saying now that they're gathering under church, but not the church with the Red Cross and with the familial ties to this area in has a governing position at like a head of state, which by itself should have ultimate like an almost like an absolute power in a tyrannical sense if one of his children are in danger. Um, so there's that that I'm noticing um, as a possibility. Um, so I'm watching this with how now they're speaking about this, and I'm just um, it just seems to be like a competing model. Um, and then I noticed on this trans gay thing that they were celebrating in Queens, which I'm on the fence with. I'm like, oh my gosh, the working class is coming out for me and saying, like, celebrating Queen's Pride. Like, I'm trying to celebrate the Queen from the head of state relationship department in excuse me, like, I know there's world stuff you have to do at your level, but there's some abuse of power going on inside that I thought the family relationships office should know about, and I don't know what they call themselves, because when I was inside the series of rooms of educational opportunity, they didn't really mention the protocols and what was correct or not, and based on the severity of what I've gone through, um, it really seems like noteworthy. So I'm gonna watch how they're playing off this media now, almost making it into a media circus of sorts. Um, and so, again, at some world theater, there is some form of dissection. Again, I know at some point I did have a college advisor, um, but I don't know how to respectfully mention to him directly, since I don't. It's been a while. Let's just put it that way. Between that time and space and where I wake up each day.
A way to help land his plane safely because once everyone is unconscious, there's really nothing that can be done. Rena Roy for Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Rena. As the city looks for housing options to support the many migrants coming into New York, the mayor is turning more and more to houses of worship to help. Providing sanctuary to immigrant communities is something many of them have already been doing on their own. Eyewitness News reporter Janice Yu with more from Lower Manhattan.
The mayor says the
But now that the modeling agency has pretty much broken with all of this travel of the lower class citizens, or the working class citizens. I do wonder now, this sense of everybody's the same, which, um, again, they're alternating. I can't agree with. So now that they've broken borders, they've broken boundaries, they've broken educational standards, they've broken, I mean, like, there's a lot of breaking that's been done. And I'm really wondering where and when this almighty and powerful God system kicks into effect in order to protect the architecture of, the children that arrived, and, the framework that was here, and had a hierarchy that, for me, it's been broken, and I don't know why.
These locations at houses of worship will be for long-term as well as short-term stays. It'll just vary depending on the location. And he also says this is actually the city's preference. They'd rather house people at houses of worship over large congregate settings like hotels.
Some call it a crisis. We call it an opportunity.
Houses.
An opportunity for what? To take advantage of the broken model, of the system that you already benefited off of for the last 2 generations, and now you have lawyers and councilmen and some US monopoly money, and there's some seats with folks like yourself in some powerful places. And so now what? The tendency is to just keep taking advantage and just drag the system down more. I mean, it's what it looks like by the facts and the way that they're presenting them, and by the actions that they keep taking.
Houses of faith across the 5 boroughs will soon be opening their doors to migrants.
Because the other thing is that our head of state here in New York is English. He is not Spanish, he is English. So at some level, I have to query and question the motivation here of what warlord is challenging my landlord by sending in non-English tenants. And what on earth did he do that deserves this level of insolence or dissidence? And why aren't the locals being told anything about this? How do we, as the working class, who are now very concerned, able to question our landlord in, like, did you approve this directly? Because this seems to be like against some form of ordinance. I mean, you're an English lord or governor over these lands. And this is very clearly some other part of America. And I'm not quite sure how that gets handled, but it does seem noteworthy as a loyal person here to my children and to myself, and I'm haven't gotten to the correct male companion, so we're not even going into that at the moment because it seems like there's even worse things going on.
Some will be sites like respite centers, places for short-term stays, like the previously vacant Lincoln Correctional Facility in Harlem and the unused hangar at JFK if the state gets federal approval, while other locations.
Now, JFK with federal approval, that's interesting because the Kennedys are the problem in the past that put together this. If we were in a white model, a Scandinavian model, what his federal system makes sense at, like, I don't know, pick one, Russian Federation, perhaps. I'd have to double check with the KIM, but who knows how to get in touch with them? I only speak English. So there's that. And then there's this Now they've broken the Scandinavian model, and now they've mixed words, terms, languages, all sorts of things into like multinational, trying to hold one conversation. But my head of state is a white gentleman who speaks English, and that's not changing. He was crowned, and there are ties between here and there. And then there is a like uncle system inside the US of ancestry that if the one crown should be challenged, there should be other uncles that stand for, that may have their own crowns, that will not tolerate or stand that level of challenge. So therefore, I'm frightened of war. I'm frightened of what the working class are doing, quite frankly, and why the white working class is not standing up and banding together and sending a very clear message. Or I don't know if they've just been miseducated or misled as well. I mean, I don't know why one would give away their national security and national secure standing to something that's not us. It doesn't make sense to me. It never did. Not as a kid, not now. And not looking into the future for this area, having a US currency system and having a crown somewhere else that looks over, because we're in something called a New York. He's got a brother that's Duke of York. Don't really know how the upper class works, those words and words of management, because I'm not there, but I'm here, and I have been affected by some of, I don't know if it's the US or the not us. I really don't know what led to what, but it looks like a lot of people putting foreign, not us nations ahead of the us nation that's been here. And I don't know when it started. I don't know why it's gotten so challenging, and I don't know how to verse it correctly and still maintain safety. But this is, when they say JFK, they're referring to John F. Kennedy, that is by the airport, which is another system I'm concerned about that's been compromised. Now, where that ties in is this was today, which is Monday, June 5th. Yesterday, Sunday, June 4th, they put on this mention of a prior president in a different administration prior to when I got here, during this Kennedy period. So I'm going to pause this for a second and go over to that. So I don't know if this is a prior era ERA fight, but it's what it seems like.
Good morning. I'm Jane Pauley, and this is Sunday Morning. President Kennedy signed the very first affirmative action order in this country in 1961 to ensure hiring by government contractors without regard to race, creed, or color. Over time, the practice expanded to include colleges and universities. Proponents say it promotes equality. Those opposed view it as a form of reverse discrimination. Now, the United States Supreme Court has.
And now it looks like they're using it to create dissidents and weaponize it and hurt women like myself. And it's taken on a whole nother revolution or a whole nother evolution, which is frightening. So that was one part of Sunday in Queens. And then I'm going to go to this other piece that they did. So that's today in Queens, that they're pushing this. They're going through churches now and through this airport. Then that's the reference for the historical portion of, like, my ears were like, wait, what? And then I'm now pulling up this piece of the local working class, um, of whatever is still existing, and the numbers of whatever they are. They were using this area called Jackson Heights to do this, and they have it as an LGBT. And when I look at L and then a GB, I'm like, is that the great beyond? Like, they're all coming together as a working class, collectively trying not to have a war break out here on our home turf, since there's real serious stuff being negotiated at all times elsewhere, um, that then will lead into some effectuation of this area. So I'm cognizant of that, and the letters that they use between the L and the T is the GB. So I'm going to pause this for a second. I'm going to bring up what they put on this weekend in Queen's Pride. And I noticed that they chose a representative, and I did notice that his name is Kill Nick. And we, personal story today. I went out with Lewis, and of course I wear my name out. And there's somebody in the park, and Lewis and I went for a walk. We said hello to a lot of different Bayside villagers or people that spend the day here. And he was giving out some of his Brother Claus cards, Brother of Saint Nick. Now, interestingly enough, he just did a video that Saint Nick is 4th century Turkish bishop. Um, and he just recently, this morning, made a video about it and put it up on his website. And then as we go out and we're walking around the lake, and he says, I'm brother, Lou Claus, brother of old Saint Nick. There was somebody who looked very much like brother of Lloyd Austin, who was sitting there with his person, and he told my father to refer to him as Hex, Hex, and I'm like, whoa. And like he seemed like underground, like real, like blown away that there really is a brother to Saint Nick still in the Bayside area. I don't know who gave him a heads up, but he definitely brought forward his name and let us know, no, like Hex. And I'm like, that is definitely good to know for whatever I got going on. Thanks much.
But you will have to do a little dancing, maybe a little singing in the rain.
So now, while I was in Bayside's Village areas, Bell Boulevard version of coming out and celebrating the locals and whatever's going on in this area, this is what was happening elsewhere under this Queen's umbrella of Queen's Pride. And there's a Pride Patrol, and their false flag is the rainbow flag that they fly for these false flag operations. I think I've heard that in terminology. I don't know if that gets twisted in language somewhere else in the US, but for me, for my construct, for my particular AIMLNNDL, this is my UG version of it, because I don't really know how else to pose this, is that it's not a US flag. So it's a false flag operation, but it's to celebrate Queen's Pride. And they've made it into some stag, perhaps. Like, I don't even know if that's the correct 4-letter affiliation for this level of operation. Like, again, I don't want to upset somebody that actually is at like a college advisory position for which I don't have access to on a day-to-day basis. But I don't know how to say, like, excuse me, I mean, I'm one of your pupils, and I've noticed something is very seriously, even if I didn't get picked for a team, I very really see where my feet are, that I should be so blessed and so happy and really like boost up my leaders. I am trying to in my hardest Queen's Pride way. I am.
David Kilnick here. I'm just learning more about the LGBT network and the connection with, because you were Queen's Pride, you reached out, and when we talk about a network, it is a community, right? But it's also about organizing and getting people active, right?
Long Island Pride is 2 years older than Queen's Pride. So when I started Queen's Pride, I reached out to David for his experiences in starting in Long Island, and he shared everything that he had with me. And that's one of the reasons why now, when we switched back to another organization, I asked David to take over and to continue to run Queen's Pride for us.
But then to put it back in the historical context, recently COVID was devastating for so many organizations and events. But this year is a big year, right?
It's a huge year. I mean, we're coming back strong. We came back strong last year, and it just keeps rolling along. I mean, more
And again, like if the Brotherhood stayed consistently looking like, yeah, maybe you had the same mother. It's one set of circumstances, but once you've got adopted children in this, it really gets to be a very tangled mess of how does this conversation actually work out for not only the absolute power that we have going on at head of state if a tussle breaks out and we've been civil, or at least I've conducted myself civilly the entire time. I tried to listen to what I was told, and I tried to remain like a Disney princess at a theme park and just wait for the correct college advisory rep to pick me full time for his whatever. But I've had some trouble getting to the right area of the whatever. So now I'm just like, my dad's in his later years, and I'm really frightful of whatever might come next. So, and I'm all alone. I've got some blacksmith Tia Frio issue. I see Tio is mentioned in Crazy Rich Asians, and then there's another version of Asians that are unhappy with America and its allies for some other reason or so. The AI is alerting me at the moment, so I don't really know how to traverse that with staying out of it, but making mention of it because there are very real. I've just recently was invited to a lemonade stand and they had Mal money, and they let me know that their outside foreign currency has a different governing face and body. I mean, I knew that they had money outside of the United States. I knew that. And I know that there has to be some kind of alliance agreement if they're here in order for them to earn this money or whatever. But again, I don't know the inner workings of that at that level of, I don't know if that goes to theology. I'm not quite sure how they strike that balance. And so on that note, they mentioned this in all seriousness.
Good morning. This close call on the high seas was not only dangerous, it was caught on video by a journalist for the whole world to see. And it happened just as the U.S. and China's top defense officials had been in the same room at the same conference, which on any other day wouldn't have attracted a lot of attention. China's General Li Shangfu used his first high-profile international appearance to address the weekend's incident with some blunt advice for the U.S.
And I do see that it has LI, and then it has Chipman, again, for me here. And then it also has this I, but it has IISS. I mean, I know that the ISS, and then there's that Thunderbird, and then there's that TV show, and then they actually do exist, and they really are. So again, I'm starting to learn some of these alphabets based on the AI that they're bringing into the ML to NN. So at DL, I'm learning, but I'm just making note of it for my own self at this point. The series of rooms I've been in have not been helpful in training me prior to this moment necessarily, though, for how to handle any of this information.
Keep your ships and planes away. He was referring to this, a close call on Saturday when a Chinese warship crossed the course of an American destroyer so close it had to slow down to avoid a collision. Last week, a Chinese fighter jet cut across the flight path of a U.S. reconnaissance plane. General Lee didn't address the Chinese decision-making that led to the incidents, but implied the U.S. was ultimately responsible. To avoid similar encounters, he said the U.S. should steer clear of the area around China. Mind your own business. But the U.S. sees routine air and sea patrols as very much its own business, where China's flexing military muscle in the Pacific. America and its allies want to underscore their position that this is international space open to everyone. At a banquet on Friday, General Lee did shake hands with the American Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. But
so in my day-to-day, I was out this morning and I was doing a nature walk with my father. We saw a turtle laying eggs. We saw the swans who just had 2 hatchlings. We were observing some of the photographers in the area who were capturing on film some of this wildlife. We were saying hello to some of the neighbors in the area of all different nations. And then there was really somewhere around on our footpath where there was somebody who looked very much like him. And he really looked almost like one of the underground artists in the New York area. Lots of piercings. And he called himself Hex, Hex. And I'm like, again, I see these micro signs of, like, I get it. It's war theater. There's ancient texts that describe that this signature dance goes on amongst the authority and some of the dissidents. But I know that I don't think they see themselves as revolutionists, perhaps, or as rebels, or maybe they do. But I don't think they really consider themselves having an anarchist's position. I mean, I'm just trying to prop up what's artificially brought forward as an artifact of intelligence. For I'm an ancestor of multiple crown, and I see some of these signs throughout the decades, and I don't see steps, especially in my real world, being taken in order to, like, bring me more to, like, a safety position. So that leaves me to believe, like, I'm just documenting as this goes on and how it's being handled. That's it for the higher ups.
China had already decided against a formal meeting, something the administration is still pushing hard for in spite of overall chilly relations.
A cordial handshake over dinner is no substitute for a substantive engagement.
I don't know if he knows why South America seems in their Spanish tongue with 3 extra letters outside of the agreed upon 26 letter characters that we use here in North America in the United States territory between East to West Coast in the US. Why are those actions being led? I mean, I guess he would be the one to question that when it seems to be like a rebellion almost, and our head of state here, the one where there is a Crown Royale connection that says it on our map, even though our currency has got the 3-letter word God and the US us and the artifacts of the artificially intelligent of what we look like. There's that. And then why it's going against the outside rep that has a very congruent look to what's on our artifacts and intelligence here, and why it's now being moved away from an English into something alternate. That seems to be a sign of aggression, and I don't understand why that's not being tended to correctly. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken. I'm going to pause this for a minute so I can get to the flag and I can show the US currency here, just to show that I'm being as honest as I possibly can for this piece. So here's a piece of the money. So again, it looks very whichever, and then it's also inside of this particular area district zone, whichever, just so the artifacts line up with some of the other symbology that's in the area. Again, it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.